welcome everyone. We're so excited to have you joining us from truly all across the world. My name is Claudia Marroquin, and I'm the Dean of Admissions and Student Aid, but I'm also an alumna of the college, and I do cover our Central America, South America, and then the Caribbean for our office, and I'm joined by my colleagues from admissions as well as someone from student aid. So we're going to go ahead and introduce ourselves so you know who might be covering which regional area across the world, and then a face from student aid, since we know that you'll likely have questions there. So Mike, I'm actually going to go ahead and get started with you.
Thank you, Claudia. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Albano. I'm the Director of Student Aid here at Bowdoin. I've been here since August of 2020.
Great. And Anne, can I have you go next?
Welcome, everybody. My name is Anne Springer, and I cover Europe for our office. I grew up in the Midwestern portion of the US. When I was in high school, I was an exchange student in Germany. And while I was at Bowdoin, I studied for a year in Scotland. So welcome everyone from all over, especially my Europeans. And I will turn it to Gerlin.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm so glad to have you all here join us. My name is Gerlin, and I am the regional representative for Canada this year. I just started my job. I graduated from Bowdoin about 2 years ago, and I have to admit I have never been to Canada, but hopefully I'll be there soon. Thanks. And I'll pass it on to Jackie.
Hi, folks. Thanks so much for taking some of your time to join us. My name is Jackie. I use she, her pronouns, and I am also an alum of the college, and I read for the continent of Africa.
And last but not least, Ryan.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Really excited to be able to spend some time with you. My name is Ryan Ricciardi. I am also an alumna of the college, and I read for Asia and the Middle East.
Great. So I also realized I forgot to name one of my territories. So I also read for Oceania, if there is anyone in the room from Australia, New Zealand, or any of the other nations in that region. But we figured that for today, we would do a brief intro to the college, not knowing what everyone's understanding of Bowdoin might be. Then we're going to go into talking a little bit about the application process and really tips on what we're looking for in each of the sections to hopefully give you some insider view, but also help prepare you even more for the application process. And then we're actually going to cover a little bit of student aid and then get to the questions you might have. So I'm going to get started with a brief intro about Bowdoin. If you're here, you probably know a few things about the college, but we are located in Brunswick, Maine. We are a school of about 2,000 students. And for us, our community and the amount of personalization that our students get is really at the hallmark of the way we do things on our campus. And I think it actually speaks volumes that 5 of us and all of us who are representing our international regions are actually alums of the college. But when you're thinking about our location, we also really do believe in the values of shared values and ethos that we have with the state of Maine. I know for many of you, the idea of coming to the US and maybe to a place you have not seen yet might be a little bit of a nerve-wracking experience, but know that when students do come to Maine and to Bowdoin, some of the things that we often hear from them is that it's a welcoming place and a place of humility. And I think those are really important in understanding the community that you would be joining. Our small town has about 25,000 people. And when you walk to the edge of our campus, you're actually then in the town of Brunswick. Our students do enjoy really going into the restaurants, the shops, whether it's the grocery store or for an evening out with your friends. We are not as remote as sometimes people might think. And I say that from my own experience, having grown up in Los Angeles and making that transition to Brunswick. But I think one of the things that I also love to highlight, especially for our international students, is that in addition to being a residential campus, you do live on campus all 4 years. I did in my 4-year experience, is that you also have the option to have a community host. This is essentially a host family, someone in the community who understands the value of being in a small college town and all of the wonderful people that are coming to our campus and want to continue to be connected to our students. But I think it's also a way for students to recognize that when you come to Bowdoin, you're not just coming for the educational experience, which is remarkable, but you're also coming for who you're going to meet, both on campus, in the community, and how you're going to grow as a young person. So that idea and that your education is not going to be just limited to the classroom, but each part of your experience on our campus is going to be an opportunity for growth and learning. To highlight one of our other location aspects, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the outdoors and the beautiful location that we occupy in Maine. Right now it is the fall, so as I look out the window, the colors on the trees are truly remarkable. But one of the things that our students really take advantage of is the fact that we're near the coast. So whether it's through academic experiences at our Coastal Studies Center, or just having the opportunity to go out and enjoy the outdoors, take a breath of fresh air, our students really do live Maine's life to its fullest. Academically, the interdisciplinary learning that our students engage in really takes advantage of the identities and the backgrounds of our students. And that's truly important to us. As we're building our community, we recognize that everyone's lived experience, the countries that you might represent, the beliefs that you have are going to add to the educational experience. Our classes are small, they're discussion-based. You show up to the classroom ready to discuss because you know that your learning is going to impact the learning of someone else in that classroom. And our faculty members are going to be right there to support you, encourage you to take opportunities beyond the classroom, whether those are internships, co-curricular opportunities. Your learning is going to be focused in a variety of capacities. So with that, I wanted to hand it over to Anne just to talk a little bit about how the academic experience, how we're recognizing it in the application process, but also how that might relate to the experiences you have on campus. So Anne, take it away.
Thank you, Claudia. When we're reviewing your application, we're essentially trying to assess two things, your head, your mind, and your heart, who you are, because as Claudia just explained so beautifully, this is a living, working community. So we're interested in all aspects of who you are in the classroom and who you are as a person. I'm going to focus for a few moments on your academic preparation and potential and how we assess that when we review applications. As you heard in our intros, in our office, we divvy up our reading by geography so that we have a dedicated reader for international territories, so that we can be familiar with the requirements of your home country and how that affects your application, so that we can continue to read the way we always do with what we call context, evaluating you within the context of the academic system your country, your school uses. How does your school label classes and structure the curriculum? And given that, what have you selected for coursework? What's your preparation been like? What's your academic success been like? So to do that, we focus on your transcript. And we are looking not just at the courses and the grades, but how your school organizes the curriculum. We know that we have many questions. I already see one in the Q&A box from a student from the UK. For instance, I'm the dedicated reader for Europe. I know that in the UK, you don't have a transcript the way we think of it in the States. So all of us in the territories that we represent, we are going to be looking at that context. What is your system, your academic system? What have you taken? What is the rigor of your academic course load? What are your grades like? That is going to give us a sense of your readiness to succeed academically at Bowdoin. We are also, if you are in a country that requires national exams, countries with national university entrance exams, those are also required as well. When we're looking at the transcript, we'll look at every year of secondary school. Typically it's 4 years. We know it's 3 years in Russia, for instance. And we're going to look at all those years and all the preparation that you've had, and we'll make an assessment. We are also looking at your teacher recommendations. And at Bowdoin, we require 3. a sort of general overview recommendation that might come. Every school calls it something different: college counselor, guidance counselor. It could be a dean of your school. It could be your academic advisor. Writes an overview recommendation for us. Then we ask that you submit a teacher recommendation, hopefully a teacher who has taught you in one of your 2 final years of secondary school in a core subject. So English, mathematics, a lab science, a foreign language, history class. And the third recommendation can also be a teacher recommendation, but it can additionally be a mentor, a coach, a peer, somebody who knows you well, who can add to the application in terms of your readiness to be part of our community. When we're reading the recommendations, we refer back to that academic work, and we want to see how the recommendations and the transcript of your academic work fit together. How are your teachers describing you as a learner and a student? Do we feel you're somebody who would take advantage of the small classes that we have at Bowdoin, the opportunity for independent study and research? Do you enjoy class discussion and debate? Those are some of the things that we look at. Then we refer back to that academic preparation and think about your readiness for Bowdoin. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Gerlin now, who's going to discuss the next part of the application process.
Thank you, Anne. So in addition to learning about who you are academically in the classroom, we also want to know how you fill your time outside of the classroom. And as Claudia mentioned, we are a residential college. So how you spend your time here, what you do with your free time, also adds into a lot of our experience on campus. So when we're looking at your high school times and understanding that the pandemic has had a huge impact on what you may have hoped to do with your time, well, we don't expect anyone to be finding the cure for cancer or winning an Olympics, but we do want to know what matters to you and what you are spending your time on. So whether that means it's a sport, art, music, community service, tutoring, paid work, or even taking care of family and family responsibilities, we want you to include all of that, those things in your application, so we can get a more well-rounded understanding of who you are and who you'll be on campus, whether there's activities you would like to continue in college or things that you want to try, new activities that you want to try. So I'm going to hand it over to Ryan.
Thanks, Gerlin. And I hope what you're getting a sense of is that we're really trying to get to know all of you, right? This is a slice. The application is a slice of who you are, but it helps us build out a picture of who you're going to be in our classroom and who you're going to be outside of our classroom, how you're going to interact with community, what's important to you. And one of the ways that we're able to do that is by reading your essay. A lot of people put a lot of emphasis on the essay, and that's because I think in so many cases, it's the one opportunity we have to hear directly from you, talking to us about a way you see the world, about a value you hold, about an experience you've had. And so that essay is really your voice in your application. That essay, I think, also, because people put a lot of pressure on themselves to write the perfect essay, can feel really big, but it's 650 words. And so I want to be really mindful of the fact that you can't put all of yourself in 650 words. So you should think about something, an aspect of yourself, a way that you see the world around you, a story that you think is really important to share about who you are. Some part of who you are is what that essay is all about. So don't try and put all 17 or 18 years of your life into that. And you don't need to use that essay to talk about what you want to do in the future. It's an opportunity really to tell us more about who you are now and how you see things, and not think about it as a way of talking about the career that you want to have or the major that you want to pursue when you're in college. It's really a way of us getting to know you, the person. And it's a really exciting part of the application for us, but it's not the only part of the application. And so I hope what you're getting is that there are all these pieces that we use to get to know you. And the essay is just one of those pieces. And when we talk about the essay as your voice, right, you are writing your 650 words for me, the admissions officer, to read. I think that's very true. But for Bowdoin, we're really lucky that we have a couple of other optional opportunities to hear your voice in the application process. And so for those optional opportunities, I'm going to pass it over to Jackie to hear how she talks about those.
Thank you very much. There are a number of different optional pieces to our application, and a lot of that has to do with what Anne was saying about your context and what you may or have the opportunity to take advantage of. So the optional components, there's a number of them that we want to cover, starting with your English proficiency testing. We do ask that students who weren't educated during their secondary school experience or in 4 years in English do provide English proficiency testing. We cannot waive that for any testing of SAT subject tests or your SAT verbal. So we do ask that you provide either the IELTS or the Duolingo English test as part of your application here. There's more information about this once you submit your application to Bowdoin, and if you can waive your English proficiency, there is a selection inside your portal that you can use to get that taken care of. We also are a test optional college. So outside of English proficiency testing, we have been test optional for the SAT or ACT exams since 1969. We know that it has been a really big challenge, especially over the past 18 to 20 months to get testing within different regions around the world, but we've also been SAT or ACT optional for 50 plus years and are extraordinarily experienced in looking at your curriculum and looking at your rigor and looking at the academic information that you provide us to determine whether or not you can be a successful student here in a Bowdoin classroom. So just know that you don't have to worry about not submitting your SAT or ACT as part of your application. If you've been able to take it and you're proud of your score, feel free to submit it to us, of course, and you can self-report your test scores. But if you've been unable to access those tests or don't want to send in your scores, then you do not have to submit them as part of your consideration. The other optional pieces are supplemental pieces from you that can tell us a little bit more about your background, what you'll bring to the campus, and what you've been spending your time doing. The three that I'll cover are the art supplement, which for our visual or performing artists, you are welcome to submit as part of your application to tell us just a little bit more about the depth of interest that you have in your medium, be it voice, be it theater, be it an instrument, whatever it may be. You can submit a portfolio to us as part of your application consideration. We also do offer interviews. You can request those on our website. They are completely virtual. So the great news for international applicants is that they are even more accessible than they ever have been before. We do recommend, but we do not require an interview as part of our process. And you can find more information about that on our website and sign up for one or request one with an alum from the college. The last piece that I just want to cover briefly is our video response. This is a unique part of our application in which we ask students to respond to a prompt on the spot, basically. So you have a video response in your portal that will give you a question that you have 30 seconds to prepare to answer and then 2 minutes to answer on video. These are really lovely, especially if you aren't able to secure an interview, for us to just hear a little bit more about you, to hear you talk about yourself or your context. The questions are really straightforward and kind of delightful. We really love them because they often tell us something about yourself that we don't otherwise hear in your application. So they can be questions such as telling us about how you celebrated your last birthday, telling us about your family or your household, telling us about your commute to school, etc. So those video response links do live in your portal, but you can find out more information about how to submit one on our website as well. So those are the optional pieces. I'm going to actually give it back to Claudia to talk about how all of those pieces come together.
Yeah, thank you everyone for doing such a remarkable job. So we recognize that a lot of the things we just discussed may be different in your individual countries. And this is truly how our admissions process works, where we take all of these factors in consideration. I know for some of you, it is entrance into a university in your home country may be based simply on an exam. And for us, it really is about how all of these pieces fit together. One of the questions we often get is, if my essay isn't great, does that even matter? It does to us. We want to take a look at each part of the application, recognizing that you are human. So perfection is not essentially what we're looking for, but we're looking at how all of these pieces fit and how we might be able to then figure out who you might be on our campus, and how you'll be able to grow and take advantage of the things that we have to offer. So truly, each of these sections gets reviewed by each of us. And through the holistic process, we start off by reviewing your academic experience. The reality is that most students who apply to Bowdoin are fully capable of being a part of our classrooms. And that's where really all of these other pieces come together to inform us about the community that we're building. So yes, take your time with each of these sections. They matter to us because your experiences, how you think about the world, not just your academics, but again, what you care about as a person matters to us. And all of these pieces do get evaluated. I saw a question about the video response and if you're able to do an introductory video. Not quite. Again, we're trying to get at little pieces of your thought process. The video response will ask you one question that you get to answer in the moment. And we also recognize that, again, it's not going to get to all of you. We recognize that this application process is giving us a snapshot of who you are. You're trying to do your best, and we're trying to do our best in figuring out how these pieces fit together. One thing that I did want to note before we hand it off to Mike to talk a little bit more about the student aid experience is that for our international students, so students who will eventually need a visa to attend Bowdoin, we do operate in a need-aware process. This essentially means that we are evaluating your application, recognizing that we also do not have unlimited funding for international students. However, if you are admitted to the college, the policies that we have in place of meeting your full calculated need by looking at your individual student experience along with your families is factored in. We also do not build in loans. And again, because we're meeting that full need, it ends up being a quite affordable education for our students. And we often get the question about our application deadlines and how that affects students who might be looking at financial aid and student aid in order to attend Bowdoin. We admit students in each of our rounds who need student aid and financial aid. We recognize that as we're putting together our class, that we're trying to recognize talent where it is, knowing that for some students, it's going to mean also funding them to be on campus. I speak from my own experience. I would not have been able to attend Bowdoin had it not been for student aid. So that's where we as an office are committed to doing our due diligence. And then once we admit you, to trying to work to ensure that it is an affordable experience. And that continues even beyond the admissions process, where there are ways that our student affairs folks might also work with you individually if there are emergencies that might come up. But I think the big pieces that we want to leave you with is with the admissions process, a need will be considered. But when we admit you, we do meet your full calculated need and do so in a way that is really trying to honor this commitment to making a Bowdoin education affordable. So I'm going to hand it over to Mike to talk a little bit about what sort of forms might be required and how his office then will take a look at that to create a student aid package for you. So Mike.
Thank you, Claudia. Good morning again, everyone, afternoon and evening, where you are. So in terms of the aid application process at Bowdoin, in terms of the application process, what we require from applicants is a form called the College Board CSS profile. And there is an alternative application that I want to make a point of talking about which is also sometimes referred to as the ISFA. I promise you this will be the sole acronym I will use this morning, but the ISFA is the International Student Financial Aid Application. And that application is an alternative to the CSS profile because there is a small fee associated with the CSS profile and its completion. In terms of that, we do have the ISFA available on our website. And over the past year, the ISFA's changed a little bit. So if you see an ISFA from wherever you see it, we will accept an ISFA regardless of the school's logo on it because there has been a change in that process. But we really encourage you to complete the CSS profile because it does allow us to streamline the student aid application process. But if you're unable to, or it presents a financial hardship, you should certainly feel comfortable submitting the ISFA. After you complete that application, what we want to do is we want to take a look at income documentation or your family's taxes from 2 years ago. And when it comes to international taxes and income documentation, that can mean something very different in terms of tax calendars and how they're different from the United States. So in terms of our Canadian applicants, we want to look at 2020 information. If you're from a country where the tax calendar is different than the United States or Canada, we want to look at that information from 2 years ago in terms of our initial analysis to determine that calculated need for aid. And I'm happy to answer questions as we get to the Q&A if we need to answer any questions as it applies to, well, 2 years ago was very different than what the now is, and we can talk about that a little bit more. But in terms of those income taxes and income documentation, they can be uploaded to our secure portal on the student aid website, where we will complete the tracking process, and you'll be able to see the completion of your aid application process through your aid checklist in your admission portal as well. From there, once we have a completed application, what we do is we take a really comprehensive look at your family's income, expenses, and assets as well. And what we do is we certainly take into account currency conversion rates from a standardized currency conversion rate standard. And what we do from there is we really do our best to determine what the family share of a Bowdoin education is. And from there, as Claudia mentioned, we produce what we hope is a very generous aid award that includes a student employment opportunity and need-based grant aid to meet that full calculated need. In terms of student aid, those are the high points, and I know I'm sure there's going to be questions. Please know that I represent, and I'm very fortunate to represent an office that has myself and 5 other individuals that are always able to answer questions and are here to help. So I think the biggest piece with the student aid process is if you have questions, please reach out to us because we're here to help and guide you through this process.
Great. Thank you for all of that. So I know we've been answering some questions through the chat and answering them by typing responses, but I'm actually going to hand it over to Ryan, who will be masterfully serving as our moderator for the Q&A.
Masterfully. Excellent. Thank you for that. And thank you for all of the great questions that are coming in. They are really wonderful. And I encourage you to keep asking them. We will try to get to as many as possible while we are here together. I want to start, there is a great one in here about, I'm going to combine a couple together, but in the idea of what makes Bowdoin special and what values we look for in our applicants and in our community. And maybe I'll start with you, but all of us can sort of fill in how we think about what makes Bowdoin special, what makes this place what it is, and why we look for what we look for in the applicant group.
Sure, happy to touch on that. So we're very proud at Bowdoin that our former Dean of Student Affairs used to say that we have a special sauce at Bowdoin. And that special sauce is that while our students are incredibly academically talented, they're also very kind and want to be part of a community and want to build on our college mission, which is serving the common good. We were founded with a mission to serve the common good, meaning that the college is not just for those who attend, but to go forth and share and do good in your communities, in your countries, in the world. When we are reading applications, we focus a lot on character. and your personal qualities. And we could give you a list that would be meaningless. Every application is different. And we want to understand who you are and how that can translate in our community. But we are looking for students who want to explore otherness, who want to be in a community with people from all over the world of different beliefs and backgrounds, and want to learn from one another in the classroom and outside the classroom. So character, open-mindedness, tolerance, those are all qualities that we look for when we're reading your application and also in the interview process. And those are things that we think make our community special. And I would say we also look for a sense of fun. Our students have fun together in the classroom, outside the classroom. This is a place where you are forming lifelong relationships with your teachers and with your peers. Some of the most influential people in your life are those whom you'll meet in college.
Thanks, Anne. Does anybody else have anything that they want to talk about in terms of Bowdoin and special and the values that we look for? Fantastic. All right. Oh, Claudia, it looked like
you just going to say, I think, as Anne noted, some of the characteristics and values, we hear this often, and it's one of the things that really brought me back to Bowdoin to work here and has kept me for 11 years, is that I truly do believe that we, in this special sauce that Anne was talking about, that students and faculty and staff members genuinely are kind. And I also think that everyone is a fascinating person. I think one of the things that I'm always delighted by are the students who I randomly ask them a question, and then that question turns into a longer conversation about what they're doing on campus. What I found really refreshing and appealing when I was a student is that I didn't have to talk about grades with people. People didn't necessarily talk about the measures of success. It was more about, what are you fascinated by? What is it that truly makes you geek out and get really excited to talk about something? And one of our students who graduated 2 years ago, while not an international student, he was very much invested in earth and oceanographic studies. He could talk to you forever on rocks. He did tons of research on volcanic activity, geothermal work. He traveled to Iceland while he was at Bowdoin. He also did research in Hawaii. He had these amazing opportunities, but he was never one to boast about those. And there were always these moments where I'm like, wait, man, Leo, you did what? Tell me more about this. And then this energy and just delight for the academic discipline would come out. We would also have amazing conversations about Netflix shows he was watching or running. But I think that's the thing that I appreciate and makes Bowdoin's people special, is that we are multifaceted. And once you start to crack the surface and to truly engage in a conversation, this is where you start to recognize the great privilege that it is to attend a place like this, where people are really invested and have interests that are well beyond just the academic discipline. But I just wanted to share that because I always come back to the conversations that I have, and that's why I so enjoy being on this campus.
I'll just add that Claudia mentioned this in the beginning. I was really nervous about coming to Maine. I grew up right outside of New York City, and I thought Maine was going to be very strange and very different. And I do think it takes being a little bit brave to come to Maine. But Maine is such a special part of being at Bowdoin. Maine is a wonderful place to go to school. Brunswick is incredibly safe, and it's an incredibly fun place to explore. And it really does weave itself into the fabric of your college experience. So in addition to all the things that Claudia and Anne have mentioned, I would just say that coming to Maine is really an amazing part of being at Bowdoin. Jackie, I'm going to throw this one to you to start, and then I would love for people to weigh in. There's a question in here about sort of what people should write about in their essay and in their additional information. And so I'm wondering if we could talk about the what part, but also maybe throw out a couple of our favorite essays that we've read, just to sort of get the juices flowing for people who are writing their essays now.
Happy to. I think that if we all had a weekend long to only talk about the essay, I think that we would all still fill that time. But generally, I think when I talk about essays, I often say that applicants get hung up on the what instead of the why, and they don't really start in a place that helps them figure out what to write about. And so the application or essay tip that I always give to students is to start with the value that you want to convey to whoever is reading it. What you want one of us to walk away from your essay really understanding about you. Are you a curious person? Is family really important to you? Has community been really important to you throughout your time in high school? Is there a particular topic that you've really enjoyed learning about that really impacts the way that you see the world? And once you start with that sort of what do you want us to know, then I really suggest that students work backwards to tell us about sort of the anecdotes or sort of the lens through which they want to communicate that. I think that we all have our favorite essays. Last year, my favorite essay was from a student who wrote about trying to understand how her brother saw the world through her lens of understanding astronomy. And she used this really beautiful metaphor about how how a telescope needs to translate the information that she sees about the universe around her, and how she was trying to find the appropriate telescope to understand her brother's point of view. And it was this really beautiful essay that communicated a really deep curiosity in terms of how she's able to apply lessons that she's learning across her life. Not all of your essays have to be that complex, right? Like, I understand that that's like a particularly like deep piece, but there was this really interesting value that we saw, not only that she was able to think about telescopes and translating information, but also that she had conveyed this deep empathy with her family. That was this really beautiful piece. So that's my favorite. I think that all of us could go around, so I don't know who else would like to go, but feel free to unmute and throw in something about your favorite essay.
I think one that I'll jump in and share too, I think you might hear essay and think it has to be a 5-paragraph form, an intro, body, and conclusion. And that's one type of essay, but your personal statement and what we're seeking out in the application does not have to follow that normal convention. Remember, you have 650 words. That is brief. And then the supplement piece, if you embark on the writing part of that, is 250 words. So one of the favorite essays that I can remember, and this is now from a few years ago, and I still come back to it because it truly has stayed with me, was a student who did something a little bit more unconventional, where the essay was these snapshots and very short paragraphs about moments in time that were really important to him. He was very fascinated by photography, so really used, again, this metaphor about snapshots and photos of memories that he had from his childhood that really together connected to weave the story. And as Jackie said, to convey the value. For him, it was really about family. And it was these moments of his grandparents actually getting him his first camera when he was leaving to come to the United States. And then it was these moments of when he used the camera to document things that he knew would be so important looking back on his life. So it does not have to be this normal form essay, but I think the thing that I would also share with students too is however you're talking about your experiences. There was a great question on, can I talk about past experiences? Of course, they are the things that have shaped us. We hopefully have learned from those moments, but also my advice is to write about something that you truly do feel comfortable writing about. So whether it is about past experiences you've had and how those might relate to aspirations, make sure that what you're writing about feels good to you, because at the end of the day, this application represents you. So try not to think about what we want to read. We read thousands of essays. There's no one right type of essay. What is right is what you are choosing to convey to us that you feel is a good representation of this moment in time, knowing that you cannot capture your entire life. But I'll stop talking there and see if anyone has anything else to add.
It's funny, Claudia, I was going to use that exact same essay as one of my favorites. And I think you should realize that this is how much attention we're paying to your application, right? This is how much you as a human being stick with us, even over several years. My other example, excuse me, of a favorite essay is, I think, an example of one to show that the essay doesn't have to be a big thing, right? It doesn't have to be a big piece about your identity or things like that. A student wrote about the values that they learned from their job, from this work that they did. And it was work that they did after school, and they worked in a local coffee shop. And there was a little bit of humor in it. They wrote about how important it is to be able to clean a bathroom well and to be able to mop a floor. But they also wrote about what it meant to be kind to someone, what it meant to look someone in the eye, what it meant to not judge someone based on what they were wearing, how to say please and thank you when someone has done something for you. And it's a very simple thing, right? This person worked for, I think, 6 hours a week. And so it was a really small part of the things that they were doing outside of the classroom, but the lessons that they learned really told me a lot about who they were as a person, and more importantly, how they were going to interact with people at Bowdoin, that they would see people for who they were, that they would value people for just being in their presence. And I think that spoke to me a lot about sort of the humanity that she saw in everything that she did. And so it was a very small topic, but it spoke volumes about the character of the person who wrote it. Does anybody else have an essay they want to share? And you're nodding your head. No? Yes?
Yeah, I would just agree with what people have been saying, that it does not have to be a flashy topic. It doesn't have to be your life story. It can be about one incident and can be effective. And the reason we don't say, don't do this topic, don't do that topic, is that just when we think we've heard it all on a topic, we get an essay that reveals new things. So it's very much how you do it.
Thank you. Claudia, I'm going to throw this one to you. There are a lot of questions coming in about which round you should apply in based on applying for financial aid as an international student and our need-aware process. Could you speak to sort of the round part and sort of how we think about people applying and when they're applying?
So for those if you're already asking questions about rounds, then you've been doing some research on our website, but we have 3 application rounds for students. We have our early decision 1 deadline, which is coming up on November 15th. And then we have a second round of early decision, which coincides with our regular decision deadline. Both of those are January 5th. Early decision for us is a binding decision. So essentially that means if you're admitted, you're coming, yay, provided that, again, all of the financial pieces work out, which in many cases absolutely do. But the early rounds are a way for students to be done with the process earlier, as the name would suggest. But we always tell students that applying early is because you have identified that Bowdoin is the place that you could see yourself at. That you've done the research, you've had the conversations where you feel comfortable making a commitment that this is the place for you, and that if admitted, you are coming. I've seen a number of the questions. I was actually just about to type a response in the Q&A box around this. I know that for students, especially international students, the financial aid piece is a big consideration. We do admit students who receive student aid in each of our rounds. As I noted earlier, we are need aware for international students. So that is one of the factors that goes into all of the pieces that we've talked about. There's the reality that financial aid will also be a piece of this. But every year, if you're thinking about the early rounds, early decision 1 tends to be the one that most students will utilize, simply because, again, this idea of this is the place that I want to be at. I've done my research and I want to be done with the process earlier if I can be. We admit students throughout each of the rounds that will need student aid. So please keep that in mind. If you have financial need and you know that Bowdoin is, the place you would love to be at, you can utilize any of the rounds. It is going to be a selective process, and that's the part that is difficult. Not only for our international students, but all students. We, again, have the privilege of having a lot of qualified applicants who are applying to Bowdoin each year. We could easily probably form 4 to 5 classes out of all of our applicants, but because we are a small residential college, we have 500 incoming students each year. So yes, the odds are difficult ones, but we truly do encourage students to focus more on what they want out of this experience, whether they've done the research, and know that there's going to be pieces of this process, whether it's at Bowdoin or elsewhere where you're applying, that are out of your hands and out of your control. So know that, yes, we do admit students who are high financial aid recipients in each of our rounds, and that includes early. And that's part of the piece where in early, we know that if we found someone that is wonderful, that we know is going to be a change maker, impact our community in wonderful ways, we don't want to lose out on that student and have you out on the open market applying to other schools. If we have you in our pool, we want to try to act as quickly as we can. But we also know that we can't act quickly on every single person due to limitations. So figure out what you feel comfortable with, knowing that early is a binding commitment. I will share that I did not apply early anywhere. I did not have the opportunity to visit places. I was a low-income student, and I was the first in my family to go to college. The search process was different for me, and it took a little bit longer. But here I am, a proud Bowdoin graduate who applied regular decision and was fully aided. So keep that in mind. Ryan, back to you.
Thanks. And actually a follow-up on that for Mike. Mike, there are questions about sort of when you get your financial aid package and then what happens if the award, it looks a little bit different. Maybe you were missing some information. Could you talk about sort of when financial aid award packages are given to students and then any sort of follow-up suggestions that you might have?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of student aid, when an offer of admission is extended to the college, every student will get a notification from student aid, whether that be a completed financial aid notification that includes their financial aid on the initial determination, or they will receive a notice saying that their aid for some reason needs some follow-up for some additional documents. So it might be a tentative award at that point. So we always encourage applicants and families to be in touch with us as soon as possible, should they have any questions about either of those situations. And one thing to also just touch upon too is that in terms of, because there were questions in the chat just about reconsideration of aid or appeals, a more common term, it's always good to be in touch with us as soon as possible, to have a conversation with us, because we certainly want to hear you as to any sort of circumstances rather that we might need to take a second look at, and we try to certainly get those requests for reconsideration turned around very quickly back to families, just so they have a sense as to what their aid is looking at like.
Thanks. I think one of the things that is so important to know about Bowdoin is that our financial aid is really robust and comprehensive, and it's really there to get you to campus, but the support you get from Bowdoin doesn't stop by just getting you to campus. That there are a lot of resources on campus and a lot of opportunities that are open to everyone, right? Bowdoin is about accessing opportunity regardless of your background, regardless of your income. And to that end, Gerlin, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about sort of research opportunities on campus and maybe some examples of STEM research and non-STEM research, and then maybe lead it towards like what that means in terms of outcomes for Bowdoin as well.
Yeah, so much to cover. So there are tons of research opportunities, as Ryan mentioned, whether it's in STEM, in the humanities, in the arts, anything you can imagine. You can also do interdisciplinary that connects many different fields. What research looks like in very different forms, depending on what you're interested in, what you want to do. I would say a lot of students start out working with professors on projects, kind of gaining those skills, both in the subject area, but also learning about how to do research, how to apply for funding, how to write, all these things. That research can look like during the school year as a part of your job on campus work study, or some students take the summer to really hone in on one project. Later on in your academic career, there's also opportunities for you to develop your own project. Again, whether through the summer, during the academic year, turning that into an independent study or a honors project. And there is funding from Bowdoin over the summer to help you offset the living costs so you can focus on your research. If you are wondering what kind of projects have been done in the past, I highly recommend going to on our website to the individual departments. On the left, you can find a tab of the past project that students have done, some with very interesting descriptions. So check those out if you haven't. And this could take a variety of ways later outcomes. So whether you want to pursue graduate school, do more research, or if you're heading into the workforce, whether it is in the US or in your home country, there are offices on campus, such as the Office of Co-Curricular Opportunities, helping you to apply to grad school. The Career Development Exploration Center helps your students with finding jobs, not only connecting you with those resources, but also preparing you the interview process, your resume, how to do case studies, networking, and much, much more.
Awesome. I have been thinking about some of my favorite research projects, and actually one of them was a student that Claudia was referencing earlier, got funding from Bowdoin to go all over the world and study rocks, geology, right? But also the impact that those rocks, the ways that climate change showed in those different rocks that they were studying, right? And I'm using rocks as like a very silly term, but it's Earth and Oceanographic Sciences, and it was really looking at how climate change had impacted different areas of the world by studying the geological history. Another student had funding to go do core sampling up in the Arctic and study climate change over the course of millennia through Arctic ice. And so thinking about what students have been able to do with their Bowdoin education, I think is one of those things that I am constantly in awe of. And that idea that sort of Anne and Claudia both referenced in the beginning, that one of the things we're most proud of with our Bowdoin students is that they take their education and go out into the world and do something good with it. And that good can impact one person, or it can impact a billion people. One person I always talk about as an example of what a Bowdoin grad has done with their education that has impacted the world is Reed Hastings. And Reed Hastings, you might not know his name, but I bet you've heard of his company, which is this tiny little thing called Netflix. And I think about that common good and that idea that it doesn't have to be solving climate change or going into public health or working in education or government, that you can do good in any industry, in business, in technology, in journalism. And Reed Hastings took his math major at Bowdoin to start this company called Netflix as a video rental company that turned into a streaming service that's now a content creation service. And I think about the impact that that's had, particularly over the last year and a half, as we've all been really sort of in a smaller world, right? Where we haven't been traveling as much, where we haven't been as out of our houses as often. And that idea of the common good applied to this really big project is a really fascinating way to think about your Bowdoin education. So there are all these ways, big and small, that I think your Bowdoin education will really shape how you see the world, but also what you choose to do with it. And the common bond between all these projects you do on campus, what you do after campus, after you graduate, is this idea of making a positive change, making an impact. And I think that that's something that I value in particular about our Bowdoin community. I am noticing that we are coming up towards the end of the hour. I'm going to end with this question that's in the chat that asks us all for a piece of advice as students are approaching their applications and sort of those deadlines coming up. Just a piece of advice from all of us about either how to approach that application deadline, how to approach the application itself, or how to take care of themselves as people during this process. And I'm going to start with you, and you could just throw it to whoever you want to next.
I think one thing I would say is, depending on what point you are in the process, what year you are in school, is to give yourself permission to change throughout your college search process. You may begin your college search process thinking you want one thing, and 6 months later, you could have very different ideas, and that's fine. And give yourself that room to change. I know that it takes time to do all the research about the different colleges and universities if you're thinking about coming to the US. And I think what you want to do is keep your options as open as possible. Apply to colleges that cover the spectrum of your academic interests and that offer the community that you want. Do you want a residential community like ours? Do you want to be in a more urban setting? And keep those options open as you begin the process.
All right, I will toss it to Jackie.
I think a little bit relating to the essay portion that we discussed before, write about your point of view. I think that probably one of the biggest mistakes that we see is when students write what they think we want to hear and not how they actually see the world. And those two things are very different. So just understands that our job is to take what you've given us and to see what you could contribute to our classrooms, and to really write from a point of view that is specific and unique to you. And we will do the rest when we see your application on the other side. I will toss it to Gerlin.
Yes, probably as the person who's gone through the application process most recently of the group, I would say I was very stressed during the whole process, and I wish I had actually spent more time on myself, focusing on mental health, resting, and taking time away. So while it is important to meet deadlines, to get all the pieces done, please do stay hydrated, drink water, sleep. We are out here to help you. So feel free to reach us with any questions. Your support networks are there to help you. And once you do make the transition to college, there are plenty of resources to help you in many ways as well. Can you drop to Claudia?
That's a perfect segue, because my advice is usually very similar. I know that this is a really important time in your life. Education is highly important, but so are so many other things that you are living through right now. This is just one piece of your experience, your life, again, your trajectory. It is not the entire definition of who you are. So regardless of what the outcomes are, keep that in mind and know that whether you're a senior right now, or maybe you already graduated and are doing a gap year, this is one part of the timeline and your time frame, and recognize that there are going to be other really important things that you also need to be paying attention to in the moment. So please try not to make your entire fall and your entire spring, as you await decisions, all about the college process. There are other things that are happening that are equally as important and will actually have probably have more of your attention in the moment. So do your best on the application, submit it, and then it is out of your control. Let the things happen, and pay attention to your daily life too. And as Gerlin said, to take care of yourself. Mike.
So I would say, as you go through this process in terms of student aid especially, all questions are good questions. So don't ever think that, a question that's asked, and our answer, we want to hear from you, because this will make the process that much easier, because we fully understand that the process with applying for aid can be complex, can be daunting, but again, we're here to help you. And in terms of a student aid context, we work with our applicants before they're admitted, while they're students, and beyond. So we really are all about forming relationships here at Bowdoin, but especially I can speak for student aid, where we form relationships with our students for beyond the 4 years. So please never hesitate to be in touch with us if you have questions. But also, I would say, just like my colleagues have said, focus, also on you and your well-being throughout the process as well.
Thanks, everyone. I would say be yourself. Your application doesn't show up on campus in the fall. You, the human being, do. And we are so excited to get to know you. And this sort of plays a little bit off of Jackie's advice. It's not about what you think we want to know, because all we're invested in is getting to know who you are as a human being. And that means that you get this time to really celebrate all the accomplishments that you've achieved so far, all of the pieces that make you who you are. There's so few opportunities that we have to say, I've done all of this work and I get to tell people about it. So that's what this is about. We're celebrating you, and you, the person, are at the center of this process. And so we're excited. We wouldn't be in this job if we weren't excited to get to know you. It really is this magical moment as we head into reading season, where we get to know thousands of people in this really neat and unique way. And we're so excited that those people have chosen to apply to Bowdoin, that we get to know you, and that those people are going to show up on our campus in the fall and go on to make Bowdoin a better place. So with that, I realize we've gone a little bit over our time. So thank you all for spending this hour with us, for getting to know Bowdoin a little bit better, for asking such thoughtful questions. Hopefully you can tell we are all real live human beings. If you have more questions as you go through this process, whether that's for financial aid or for any of the admissions officers here, please feel free to send them to us. Our email addresses are on our website. Be in touch. Let us know how we can be helpful. And in the meantime, please take care of yourselves. As Gerlin said, spend some time away from your application. As Claudia said, do things that make you happy outside of applying to school. And really enjoy this life that you get to live. And thank you again for spending some time with us today. It was really a pleasure. Bye, everybody.
Bye.